At this time, I'll call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. We do have an agenda before us. Are there any changes to that agenda? Not, we'll operate it under that agenda. We'll note Councilmember Schaefer is participating remotely. For that reason, we will be all on roll call votes this evening. So, first item on the agenda is consider the approval of the minutes of the meeting that was held on November 26th. That was the regular meeting. Are there any corrections to note at this time?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by John to approve the minutes as they've been presented. We will move to a roll call vote. I'll call on Stephen Anderson to call the roll.
Lazinski,
Yes.
Molesky,
Yes.
Alcorn,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
and Schaefer.
And Schaefer.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. We'll move then to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we'll bring the items up on the screen. And they include consider the lease agreement between Vishay High Rail Systems LLC and the City of Marshall. Consider the approval of the 2025 Workers' Compensation Insurance and Volunteer Accident Plan, the Tiger Office Park, the introduction of the preliminary plat. Consider the approval of the 3.2% malt liquor license renewal for 2025. Consider the approval of tobacco licenses renewals for 2025. Consider the authorization to declare vehicles as surplus property for the Marshall Police Department, the authorization to accept donations made to the Marshall Police Department, and consider the approval of the bills and the project payments. So is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion? If not,
Move approval as presented.
motion by Craig, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by C, discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Stephen?
Alcorn,
Yes.
Molesky,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Lazinski,
Yes.
and Burns.
Yes, the motion does pass. Agenda item number 10. Before we move further with the agenda, one of the items on the agenda this evening is the truth and taxation hearing by state statute. That cannot occur before 6 p.m. So depending on where we're at with the agenda, we may or may not jump ahead or behind with that agenda item. But we are on agenda item number 10, which is to consider the redesign of the Marshall Aquatic Center and direct Contegrity and Stockwell to develop the final plans. So as we all know, with the outcome of the bid the first time, we went back to doing some redesign, engaged Contegrity to also work with Stockwell, and the Aquatic Center Committee of the City Council has been very involved with that. So we're at the point now of their plans were presented at our work session earlier this evening, and we're at the point now of taking the next step in that action. So I'll have Sharon Hansen introduce not only this agenda item, but the presenters.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, you covered it quite well as far as where we were and where we're at today. We have David Locke from Stockwell who will talk about the specific design changes incorporated and presented to you tonight to help us get within budget. And we also have Pete Filippi and Larry Filippi who will be our representatives from Contegrity to talk about the budget and an upcoming schedule for the council to consider. They are requesting formal action to proceed with the redesign and proceed with bidding documents in the hopes of coming back here in late January to get your permission to authorize advertisements for bid. So we'll start with David, if it's okay with you, and then follow up with our construction management team.
So welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you eloquently put, and Sharon, we've been working as a team on the redesign of the new aquatic center. The new designs, some of the big moves that we made overall are just reducing the size of items to get us back closer into within budget. We previously had two separate buildings, a mechanical building and a bathhouse. We've consolidated those into one location on kind of the planned south area, which was the previous area where the bathhouse was. So the entrance into the facility still stays the same. The lifestyle pool, which is in the upper right-hand corner, still kept the wide zero depth entry. We reduced the size of that a little bit and also reduced the size of the play structure that's on the north side of that body of water. That play structure, aquatics play structure, would be smaller in scale than previously. To the upper left-hand corner of that then is the Leisure River. The length of the river has not changed. The main element that came out of that was we had a separate activity channel that had more spray amenities. That activity adventure zone was removed to reduce square footage of water. And in the lower left-hand corner is the deep water pool. Previously, we had 8 lap lanes. There are now 4 lap lanes to reduce the square footage of water in that space. The size, kind of the L shape that you see there on the left-hand side, is sized to be able to accommodate the fly time slide and the launch and landing area of the fly time slide. The fly time slide would be an add alternate, not in the base bid, but the pool would be set up to hold that and accommodate that element in the future if needed. Still kept shade structures throughout the facility. We consolidated the surge tanks all into one location, adjacent to the mechanical area, pool mechanical area of the building, and overall just kind of shrunk the square footage of the site and the impacted site area. The aquatics elements in terms of square footage of the pool area reduced by about 20 to 22%. The building shrunk by almost 30%, just kind of got rid of and consolidated elements. And Pete and Larry can kind of talk through some of the building materials and approach to the construction of that and some reductions that we looked at from a building standpoint. So this is what the base bid is. The slide tower in the upper left-hand corner would be sized to accommodate the potential future body runout slide and the fly time slide. The base bid slide is the tube slide that goes into the plunge area of the lazy river. That slide tower is 35 feet tall. So in terms of where we were at originally with the bid in the summer, the size of that tower has not changed. If you go then to the next page, that shows the add alternates that we're going to be looking at incorporating into the design. Add alternate number 1 will be the fly time slide. And for the fly time slide, which is alternate number 1, the speed flume slide into a runout is alternate number 2. So both elements in association with that slide tower. And then the splash pad is at alternate number 3. Those 3 alternates will be broken up into an A and a B alternate. Alternate A associated with those elements will include the piping to those locations, so that way we don't have to tear up pool deck or tear up some of the areas within the facility to accommodate adding those elements in the future. So the A part of all of those alternates would get piping to those areas. The B portion of it would be providing the rest of the amenities to have a fully built out element. So for the slides, it would include the structure itself, the pumps. For the splash pad, it would include the spray features themselves, the full splash pad construction, the shade structures, the fencing adjustments, and the sidewalks associated with that. We would also have an add alternate number 4 would be the climbing wall structure in the deep water pool. The deep water pool would be able to accommodate the use of the fly time slide, the diving boards, and the climbing wall all at one time, so they would all be able to be used at the same time. And then alternate number 5 then would be additional spray amenities within the zero depth entry adjacent to the play structure, so some more above ground interactive spray amenities in that space. With that, I can turn over to Pete and Larry to talk through the costs.
Thank you, David.
Yeah. We have in front of you is the estimated cost of how we see the base bid of this project. We broke it down into 3 major elements, the site, the building, and the aquatics. The site making up not only the earthwork portion, the pool deck, the deck drains, fencing. The building itself, as you saw on the plan, it consolidated to two buildings. We reduced the square footage, simplified the construction. We worked quite a bit with David and his team and architects to dial that in to a little bit more straightforward, simpler build. And then the aquatics portion of it, which is obviously plays a big role, half the budget on that at about $7.9 million. You can see we also carried through on the contingency, 2 different contingencies. One, the design bid market fluctuation. That'll go away once we award bids. That's just to handle, changes and or give us a little bit of leeway until we get hard bids. A construction contingency and owner's contingency we carry throughout the project. Handle any changes that came up. General conditions elements, we have building permits in there, special testing, some of those elements that would have been wrapped under the umbrella of a general contractor when it was bid out the first time. CM fee or architect's fees, and then we carried through the original owner items as originally budgeted to come to a total estimated project cost of $18,988,000.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions or?
Questions from the council? Input from the Aquatics Committee?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just, again, want to really extend my gratitude as a committee member to city staff and to both the architect and our construction management firms for all the work that they've done with this. They've really stepped up. They've been good to work with. There's been a ton of work and consideration put into this, and we really appreciate their thoughtfulness and dedication to trying to bring this project to fruition.
Any other input? I would just say that, the charge to the committee, the charge to this group that's been working on this is to preserve the integrity of the project while bringing it in a way that is cost effective. And I think we're on the road to getting that done. So obviously we have the sales tax proceeds that was authorized. We also have fundraising that has been going quite well too. So do you want to make any comments on that, Sharon?
Yeah, I know our fundraising committee, which is led by Mark Clayton and Amanda Schwartz, we met recently as well and just kind of talked about where we're at. Unfortunately, with the higher bids than we anticipated back in August, it did kind of mean literally a pause on fundraising. And so I think if we can get some good momentum from good bids, hopefully, with this redesign, that could provide some extra efforts and hopefully some additional interest from community members that would like to contribute. We do have a fair number of donations. Some of them are committed. Some of the dollars are in hand. I know that I think Mark or Amanda might have some of that data, and you were given a handout. They can certainly talk about that further, and they can also talk about some of the feedback that they may have received from some of the donors or some of the folks that they talk with regarding this project.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to make any comments, Mark or Amanda?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We did meet. We are continued to make that integrity of that pool what it was supposed to be. There was some donors that had contributed to specific items that they really want to see in that facility. So as a committee, after the bids come in, we're going to go back and see where we're at, and we're going to go back and try to raise some more money to keep that integrity of that facility that we had originally talked about. Granted, it's gone down to a smaller size. but there's certain parts of that we feel that really need to be put back in. And we're going to use the splash pad as part of it. So again, like Sharon said, we're hoping the bids come in feasibly and nice, and so we can go back after. We do have, this community wants that aquatic center. So I think once we get the bid and get back in momentum, I think it's going to be fine.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Amanda, for your leadership on that. One of the things that, if authorized this evening to go to a final design, then that will set up then the time schedule. And as Sharon, you mentioned earlier, that potentially bids would be authorized to go out for bids in late January, and then we would have a more exact schedule on bidding and the ultimate award of the bid of the project and construction schedule following that January action. Any other input or questions? If not, the request is to authorize Contegrity and Stockwell to develop final plans.
Make motion.
Second.
Motion by C, seconded by John. Discussion on that motion? If not, we'll proceed to a vote. Stephen?
Alcorn,
Yes.
Wazinski,
Yes.
Walewski,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Mayor Burns.
Yes. Then the motion does pass. Thank you. We'll move then to agenda item number 11, consider an ordinance amending Chapter 14 related to animals. So Ilya, are you going to start with this? No. Stephen? Thanks for the quick reaction to that, Ilya. So,
It's a 10-foot pole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This ordinance was previously introduced during the last regular meeting in November. Chapter 14 animals needed a lot of updating, especially with definitions and just matching with state statute. A lot of the common things like hamsters, gerbils, guinea pigs weren't allowed. Pet stores weren't allowed. What was another odd thing that we had in the ordinance was petting zoos. So Sounds of Summer, when we had petting zoos and whatnot, those were also technically not allowed under the current ordinance. So we went back and cleaned up a bunch of that to get things to where they should be and how we're currently operating. Also along with that, as everyone's well aware of by now, I believe, is Article 5 introduces backyard chickens. With the backyard chickens, we were proposing to allow 5 hens, no roosters, no slaughter. Coops and runs would be required in backyards, and there were specific setbacks that would also be in place with the proposed ordinance with adding Article 5. If there's any questions, I'm available.
we'll start out. Are there any questions for Stephen? This also has been discussed by committee. And there's really 2 parts to this, as Stephen has said. One is the cleanup of language related to practices that and identification of animals that is more of a housekeeping thing. And then there's the second part of it, which is the allowance of egg production in backyards. So the council has 2 alternatives. 3 alternatives. One is to not pass anything. Second alternative would be to pass what I would call the cleanup item, but not take action on the backyard chickens. Or the third action would be to pass everything, including the cleanup items and the backyard chickens. We'll open up for general discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I guess I'll start it off if I could.
Go ahead, Craig.
Initially, I was literally on the fence with this, and after a lot of discussion with staff and also with residents, constituents, I'm in total support of cleaning up the language in our animal ordinance, but I cannot support the backyard chickens.
Thank you, Craig. Other input?
And I'm opposite of Craig. a year ago, I said, no, I do not support this. Now that my daughter lives in a community where she can't have backyard chickens, and I've experienced how it works, it's really not that big of a deal. And it's helped her daughters learn how to, use agriculture, be responsible. And, if people say it's to disturb the neighbors, it doesn't disturb the neighbors. The only time her chickens ever disturb her neighbors is she's banging pans to get bears off the top of her chicken coop. They don't stink, they don't cause trouble, and it gives us another opportunity to allow our citizens to use their yards the way they want to see them. And also we talk about trying to keep our young people here. This is something that young people like to do, and if we keep saying no to them, they keep leaving. I'll use my children as an example. My daughter says, well, there'll be another check for us to make sure we don't come back to Marshall because I can't bring my chickens with. So I am in support of this. It's only 5 hens. And it's very restrictive on how we designed the coops and everything else. So it was very well thought out. And I am in support of the backyard chickens, but also very much in support of allowing us to have hamsters too.
Thank you. Other input?
Yeah, I'm in favor of cleaning up the language as well. And I am also in favor of backyard chickens just because, we have a really diverse community here and it's going to be a lot more welcoming, especially for our immigration population. I mean, I grew up having chickens in our backyard and it really helped us with the assimilation of, coming from our country into the United States here, and it definitely gives it that more welcoming vibe. And I have family members who live in other towns who have chickens and they don't have any issues at all. And actually, I love my favorite part about it is the food waste reduction in that, your children's not eating food and you bring out to the chickens and they eat it. So it definitely will reduce food waste into our landfill. And I know that there was some concerns, and I know you addressed it too, about free range chickens, and they're not going to be free range. They're going to be contained. They're not going to make any noise. I would argue that I have a neighbor whose dog is probably going to be louder than the chickens. Disposal, I know some people are worried about that too. My Labradoodle probably kills more rabbits than anything, and I have to just bag them, throw them in the dumpster. So rabbits are probably as big as their chickens. So I'm in favor of this.
Thank you, C.
Yeah, and if there's one issue that I've gotten a lot of feedback from people is this issue right here. And I've had 0 people give me feedback that they're in favor of it. People are just not in favor of having chickens in town and feel like, that should be out on the farm, out in the country. And so for that reason, I'm going to say I'm not in favor.
There was a petition of, you said, Sharon, over 90 people signed it for the ordinance to be introduced. That's why I brought it forward, is the petition of, and I'm not sure the number. I know I said 100. Sharon said, no, Jim, I think it was only a little over 90.
Yeah.
So, but there are 96.
It was an online petition. It was not something formally submitted to the city or vetted for legality by the city attorney, just to clarify that.
Okay.
So my view, and I did talk a little bit about this when this was introduced last time. I have some concerns about backyard chickens. I'm obviously in favor of the cleaning up the language of the first part of the recommended ordinance. But my concerns are public health, animal health, property issues, and also the enforcement. From the animal health and the public health, the Minnesota right now has an increase in avian influenza outbreaks. A lot of our commercial farms do a very good job of biosecurity, but there isn't that level of biosecurity with backyard chickens. And certainly the transmitter of avian influenza virus to domestic or to chickens is the migrating waterfowl. Certainly we have a lot of migrating waterfowl in this community with our geese population. So we're right in the flight path, and there is a risk there. Avian influenza also has been transmitted from avians to swine, to cattle, and to humans. So there is risk there, and I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about the property issues because, and see, I respect what you and Jim have said, and that probably will be like most of our regulations and laws, they're not necessary for 95% of the people, but for those, that minority of property owners that might be causing some issues, that's what causes, the enforcement part. And then that's my final point is enforcement, is that really what we want our building staff or police department to be doing in really enforcing some property rights issues. So that for those reasons, I'm not in favor of this. But at this point, we don't have a motion on the floor. We just have general discussion about the issue. I'd open it up for any other general discussion, but also entertain a motion.
Well, I'd make a motion to adopt the ordinance as it's written in its summary publication.
I second that.
Motion by Jim, seconded by C. Discussion on the motion? If not, Stephen, would you call the roll?
Schaefer,
No.
Alcorn,
No.
Wolesky,
Yes.
Lazinski,
Yes.
and Mayor Burns.
No. So that motion does not pass. I would entertain an alternate motion.
I move we adopt the corrected or the amended ordinance with the without the approval of backyard chickens.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion on the motion? Attorney Whitmore, you're fidgeting. Do you have any comments you want to make at this time?
Nope, I'm just in an uncomfortable chair, Mayor.
Okay.
So,
So are we, yeah. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, Stephen, would you call the vote?
Alcorn,
Yes.
Wolesky,
Yes.
Lazinski,
No.
Schaefer,
Yes.
and Mayor Burns.
Yes. And the motion does pass. Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor, Council, does the clerk or city administrator Hanson feel the need that that's long enough, that this should be a summary publication? And if so, then we need to have a motion on that separate, since that was not included because of the changes.
Let's have a motion on the summary publication. Just a
So move.
motion by Craig,
Second.
second by John. Discussion? If not, Stephen?
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Alcorn,
Yes.
Wolesky,
Yes.
and Lazinski.
Yes.
Then the motion does pass. Thank you, everyone. We'll move then to the next agenda item, which is the adoption of the ordinance amending Chapter 86 and adding Section 166, the certification of cannabis business license application. Ilya.
That's me.
Very good.
Thank you, Mayor Council. So the changes we are doing right now are related to the recent law passed by the state of Minnesota that allows cannabis products to be sold and manufactured and everything else. So the proposed changes reflect basically the only thing that the city has the right to regulate, meaning location of each cannabis-related business type. State has 13 licenses, and that's what we are trying to cover here in the ordinance. So basically allowing, regulating all of them is one item and specifically listing which particular license that applies to in each zoning district. There are a few other minor changes here. I want to also mention that we prohibit retail within 500 feet of all schools. That it's again minor housekeeping items. Shopping district is removed because there is nothing on the map anymore. But other than that, it's mostly about cannabis. It was approved by the LNO after several adjustments from the staff and public hearing at the last planning commission went well, and it was recommended for approval.
Okay. Thank you, Ilya. Pam Whitmore, City Attorney, do you have any input that you want to give at this time?
No, none at this time.
Okay.
Ilya covered it. Thank you.
Questions? If there's no questions, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make motion.
Second.
Motion by C, seconded by Jim, to approve the adoption of the ordinance and adding certification of the cannabis business license application. Discussion on that motion. If not, we'll move to a vote. Stephen?
Schaefer,
Yes.
Valesky,
Yes.
Lazinski,
Yes.
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
and Alcorn.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. Thank you, Ilya.
Thank you.
We'll move then to agenda item number 13, and it is 6:00 p.m. So agenda item number 13 is the Truth in Taxation public meeting. I'll call on Sharon Hansen to first introduce this, and then I believe E.J. Moberg, our Director of Administrative Services, will be giving a short presentation, and then following that, we'll take any public input. Sharon?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, we started this process in June with departmental inputs into the budget. We had multiple work sessions and in city council meetings regarding the budget and levy. Our Director of Administrative Services has provided several slides to talk about impacts for the budget that will ultimately lead to our discussion of levy. And so I will turn it over to him to give a good synopsis of where we're at.
And as E.J. is coming up, I should also mention, this is not an action item. This is a truth and taxation hearing. So action on the proposed levy and, of course, the proposed budget would occur at the next regular meeting, which would be December 17th. E.J.?
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and get started. Again, the purpose tonight is to discuss the proposed budget and levy for 2025, and then to give reasonable time for public comment and questions on said budget and levy. Again, to make sure everyone's aware that the market values shown in the truth taxation notice were established last spring and are not subject to the hearing tonight. Those values were discussed and established at the local Board of Appeal and Equalization. We will start, though, with tax capacity, which is based on the values. This slide is included so people can see from payable 2020 through proposed pay 2025, the breakdown of the commercial, which is in blue, versus the residential, which is in orange. The apartments are shaded in gray, ags in blue, the dark blue, and then the all others in the yellow. So you can kind of see the stress that has been put on residential properties just due to their share of the tax capacity as that's grown over that time. The next slide here, this is the numbers for the tax capacity from 2020 through 2025. So you'll see that just from 24 to 25, that property values increased 1.47% for the levy when you exclude our TIF calculation or TIF deduction for calculation purposes. The next slide shows the tax levy comparison from 2020 to 2025. The proposed levy was at the $9,969,560. And the next slide shows that numerically. So it was a 9.8% increase. You can see the increases for those other years. Tonight is about the 2025 piece. So this particular graph or pie chart shows our general fund, special revenue funds, debt service funds, and capital projects funds for 2025, and it shows our revenues, which are budgeted over $22 million. The biggest portion of that is property tax. At that $9.8 million number, it is 45% of our revenues that are budgeted for the year. The next slide is for those same fund types. These are the expenditure side, and on the expenditure side, we're at over $23.6 million. As expected with community our size and just in general, public safety is our biggest area. For us, we also have 15 cents approximately of every dollar would go towards general government, 23 cents toward public safety, 20 cents for streets and highways, 16 cents for culture and recreation, 22 cents for debt service, and then everything else is under the 4-cent category. And the other would be airport and EDA. Our levy history for those 5 years for the different funds that that we levy for. We have the general fund, capital equipment fund, street improvement fund, economic development authority, and then our various debt service funds. You can see there that what the breakdown is our general fund ultimately, of the 9.8% total levy, the general fund itself is going up just under 7%. Our capital equipment fund is going up 66%, and that's because we've had $300,000 budgeted in 24, excuse me. We had $300,000 budgeted. We now are budgeting $500,000 because of a switch in our leased vehicle situation. We were going from leased vehicles to purchasing vehicles again. Street improvement fund is under 6.7%, EDA is under 1%, and then our debt service funds are up 11%, and that's based on bonding projects that were done earlier in 2024. That 2025 will be the first year that we have to levy for those projects. So our big impacts for us, impacting our budgets and levies, again, no surprise for government, our big cost is personnel. In our budget, we did include a 3% cost of living allowance. Council has since approved one union agreement and approved non-union COLAs with negotiations with 2 additional unions pending. This budget does include 2 new full-time equivalents for the police department. Some of those costs were partially offset by the fact that we do have some scheduled military leave in 2025. So we didn't have the full burden per se of adding those positions yet because of the military leave, which will not be paid by cities on that project or on those leaves. Our health insurance, we budgeted for a 10% increase. And then we are, as we have in the past couple years, our reserve spending is trying to be minimal. So our reserve spending at this point is the proposed budget does plan to use $25,000 of fund balance from public safety aid monies that we received at the end of last year to help lower the impact of those full-time equivalent positions that were added. Of the levy percentage for the 9.8 million of our 9.8% increase, this kind of breaks down by fund. So again, general fund is 66%, our debt service funds are about 23%. The next one just shows, just for the general fund, the budgeted expenditures by function. And I did throw up for 2 years there, 24 versus 25. Our 24 budget in the general fund was over 15.1 million, and now we're just under 15.9. You can kind of see there the impacts. General government's up approximately $84,000. Public safety's up 200 plus thousand. Public works is up, et cetera. These are our largest, or these are our categories of areas. General government would be things like the mayor and council, cable, finance, administration, assessing, legal, et cetera. Culture and rec would be community services, parks, aquatic center, community ed, recreation, and the like. And the library is just our share for what we contribute to the community, or the Marshall Lyon County Library. On the expenditure side, just by department, so going under the function, but now to department, of the 15.87 million, our biggest area is police, which is 26%, then streets, which is 11%, parks is 7% of our budgeted expenditures, engineering is at 6%, the library is at 5%, fire is at 5%, airports around 5%, and then all other categories make up 35%. So our levy increase, again, for what was approved for the preliminary and what's recommended to be addressed next week. The largest budget impacts of that 9.8%, over 9.54% are laid out here. Our payroll and fringes for the general fund and EDA, which those funds are chosen because those are the ones that have levy impact. Some of our other funds, we don't levy for the increases of like wastewater, liquor store, et cetera. But of the general fund and EDA, that impact is over 4.75% increase over the 2024 levy. Our debt service funds, again, which relate to the function of we had some minor debt service fund that was fully paid off, but then another one that came on for the projects from this year, that adds 2.56% of the 2024 levy for the increase. And then again, that change to go from leasing towards purchasing vehicles will add 2.23%. So that's 9.54 of the 9.8% increases just in those three categories. Looking at the average residential property of the different tax bills that went out in the truth taxation notices, the county share is approximately 21%, the city share would be 51%, and the school is 28%. The special taxing district is minor, doesn't even amount to 8%, but there is that as well. So the question is, well, how much do I pay for city services? So I gave an example here of what am I paying for if my city share of that total. So in this case, I use a residential homestead with an estimated market value of $176,500. The proposed total property tax would be $1,957. That would mean about $1,000 is a city share. Of that $1,000, this is a breakdown. I use 1,000 so that the percentages are here. You can easily multiply it by your own situation or some other situations you have. So you'd see that the big impacts here are $23.12% is going towards debt service. Police is over 18.5%. Streets is over 9.4%. Parks is 5.57%. Capital equipment fund is over 5%. Library is over 4.3%. And street improvements over 4%. So just picking the ones that show they're over 4%, that's over 70% are in those 7 categories I just listed. As far as our total of what this particular property would get as part of the tax bill, 70% is going towards those categories. In comparison to some of the other cities out there, the statewide adopted levy increase was 8.8%. So sadly, we're not alone. At the same time, hey, we're not alone. You see some of our comparable cities are here. It ranges from a 6.6% levy increase for St. Peter all the way up to 18% for Worthington from what they adopted for their preliminary levy increase. Just as a comparison, statewide, the average county increased 6.4%. Townships were at 6.3%. Schools are at 4.4%. They're a little different in that theirs are kind of not dictated, but they're set kind of by the Department of Education, and then they pretty much just adopt the maximum levy. And then special districts are up 5.7%. Getting into the capital equipment levy, I did want to just mention this one. We have a $500,000 budget in this category. If you remember in some of our early discussions, we had over almost $600,000 requested for the $300,000 of equipment that was there, which on what's on the screen would be from that top line for the fire department all the way through the motor grader that's highlighted in yellow. That piece today is down to $325,220. We're still working on some numbers for that. And then the idea of purchasing instead of leasing cars, all in this case would be for the police department. They're currently a little over the $200,000 threshold. But we're going to be approaching that. $500,000 is what's going to be proposed for the levy. We're not going to ask for more to get to the $544,000. The final budget and levy will be recommended to be adopted at the council meeting next week, as the mayor said, on December 17th at the 5:30 meeting. That's the presentation as I have. If there are questions or comments from the public, now would be the time.
Okay, thank you, EJ. First off, from the council, any questions?
Well, I just want to tell the staff we appreciate your hard work, because I know EJ and I visited a lot about this and push really hard on these numbers, and EJ, I appreciate taking the time. As I tell you, you're too high, and you say I'm too low. I appreciate the work that we do to get it to where it's at.
Open up for any public comment as part of this truth and taxation hearing. Any member of the audience wish to speak? I got it. And if you'd, because we're on televised, I'm going to ask you to come and use the microphone. Then you can give your name and your address too, property address. So, thank you.
I'm Gary Vlamic. I own a rental on Daniel Circle. I think the taxation is extreme. $500 in 1 year going up. It seems like that's not really realistic to go up $500 in 1 year, but
And the, Dave Parsons is in the back. Do you want to, Dave may have some questions. Is it did your valuation change?
I don't know why I would have, but maybe a little, but
Okay. Thank you. Dave, would you mind following up with Mr. Belamic? Anyone else wish to speak? Any other comments from the council? If not, is there a motion to close the truth and taxation hearing?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Motion by Jim, seconded by C. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Stephen?
Lizinski,
Yes.
Alcorn,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Yes.
Wileski.
And the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 14. This is the bituminous overlay on various streets. We have a change order, final change order, and the acknowledgement of the final pay request. Jason Anderson, City Engineer, Director of Public Works.
Thank you, Mayor. Included in the packet, you've got a drawing that identifies the streets that we're overlaying this year, and there's also a table in the packet that lists all the streets. This work was concluded quite a while ago, but we've been waiting to receive final paperwork from our contractor. We now have all that in place, and we'd like to move forward with the final change order number 2, as well as the final project payment. The capital budget included $650,000 for this project. The original contract amount was $587,422.58, and our total with this final change order is $533,195.76. We would recommend to move forward with approval.
Any questions?
I'll make the
I
motion.
move
Approval.
second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, Stephen will move to a vote.
Lizinski,
Yes.
Wileski,
Yes.
Mayor Burns,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Alcorn.
Yes.
Motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 16. This is the South Hill Street, South Minnesota Street, Charles Avenue reconstruction project. And once again, we have to consider the resolution that would receive the feasibility report and call for a public hearing on this project. Once again, Jason.
Mr. Mayor, this is
Oh, I'm sorry.
one ahead there.
I jumped one. Sorry. We'll move. We'll do this in order. Agenda item number 15 then would be the project with the Highway 23 lift station improvement project, Phase 4, the wet well renovation. We have the final change order to consider, and then the acknowledgement of the final pay request.
Yeah.
Jason.
Thank you. Similar to the last project, this one's been completed for quite some time. We've been waiting on final paperwork from our contractor. We now have that in place. This was the removal of the existing pumps at the Minnesota 23 lift station out by the high school. Once we removed the pumps, we renovated the wet well and installed 4 new pumps at that lift station, along with some associated work. Original contract was $297,200. Final payment, first and final payment here results in a total of $279,536.67. We would recommend to move forward with the final payment.
Questions about this? The only question I have, and this came in under budget, which is a little surprising given that this project occurred during extreme rain events and required the kind of the on-site 24-hour supervision of the pumps that were there. And so maybe you want to make some comments on that.
Sure, yeah. The pumping company, I believe they're called Rain for Rent, they did a great job. They had plenty of pumping capacity on site, and there was quite a substantial cost in this project, but it was all bid into the project. The cost savings was mostly the result of a paint coating system for the wet well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Jason?
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor, I really appreciate the work that was done. I know that this was kind of changing the protocol or procedures that we normally do to bring this in with a very favorable bid and then obviously a very favorable result. So my hat's off to engineering and public works on this. And with that, I'd make a motion to approve.
Motion by Craig, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Stephen?
Alcorn,
Yes.
Wolesky,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes.
and Mayor Burns.
Yes, the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 16. This is the South Hill Street, South Minnesota Street, Charles Avenue reconstruction project. The action suggested here would be to consider the resolution, receiving the feasibility report and calling for a hearing on the improvement. Jason.
Thank you, Mayor. Included in the packet is the feasibility report for your review. This project is what we call Phase 2 to the Whitney project that was completed this past summer. It's the one block of Minnesota and Hill Street between College Drive and Charles Avenue, and then it's 2 blocks of Charles Avenue between Minnesota and Whitney Street. Full reconstruction is proposed here with water and sewer replacement, as well as some minor storm sewer improvements. You'll note that the alleys here are shown for reconstruction as well. That's where the water system serves these properties, so we'll have those excavated pretty significantly as well. So we're proposing to reconstruct the alleys with this project. We did host a public informational meeting with residents in this project area a few weeks ago. They'll receive notice once we set a hearing date tonight to come to a public hearing as well. So right now we have an engineer's estimate, including some contingency and engineering fees, bringing that estimate to about 1.5 million. All improvements would be assessed per our current special assessment policy. Staff would recommend that we move forward with calling for a public hearing on January 14th.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Questions?
Jason, I have a quick question. When you reconstruct the alleys, those were planned, I couldn't find it, but reconstruct as gravel alleys, correct?
The proposal would be to pave those alleys. We're proposing concrete at this time, but we're open to working with a bituminous surface if needed. Today, they are paved. They're blacktop alleys, not in the greatest condition the whole way through. But with the significant grade differential on both sides of the alley, we think there'd be a benefit in using concrete to control elevations and keep the water in the alley, so you don't end up passing water from one side of the alley to the other. That's what we would propose to do. We think that if we were to tear it up and put it back as gravel, that may not be well received.
How is that going to tie into our special assessment policy now as homeowners are required to pay for all costs in an alley if it's paved?
Yeah, that's a good question. We'll probably have a good portion of the alley torn up with the water project, and Marshall Municipal Utilities will pay for that portion of the alley. I don't know how much yet. We haven't gotten that far. I would say 50 to 60% of the cost of the alley could be charged to MMU to cover that. The remainder would have to be either assessed to the property owners or picked up by the city. And we have been talking to various city council committees to discuss an adjustment to the special assessment policy with regard to alleys, because right now they are 100% assessed to property owners. We are proposing some tweaks to that language that perhaps the city would pay 25% of the costs in a residential area. That'll be something that we'll bring forward at a later meeting.
Mm-hmm. Good
Thank
question. Any other questions for Jason?
Yeah, and I'm assuming that the cutoff line on Hill Street is that this will be part of the College Drive project, correct? That's why the stub is so far up into Hill Street?
Yes, thanks for pointing that out. The limits on both Hill and Minnesota are quite a bit short of College Drive, and that is to dovetail in with the MnDOT project. So we're stopping where their limits would pick up.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
And then my last question, this one is being proposed, I know we had the issues with the trees on Whitney. You're proposing leaving the trees and completing this such as you did with Whitney Street in Phase 1?
Yes, it'll be significantly easier in this project because there's fewer crossings of that median area with utility service lines. There might be some minor displacement, but we plan to actually plant a few additional trees with the project as well.
All right, thank you.
Good. Any other questions? If not, you have the recommendation. Is there a motion?
I'll make.
I move the resolution
Or
or
second.
the recommendation.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Stephen?
Schaefer,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Alcorn,
Yes.
Wolesky,
Yes.
and Lizinski.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 17. This is the East Lion Trail Project. We'll consider the resolution authorizing the agent of the sponsoring agency for the active transportation project, as well as the resolution identifying the responsibility for operation and maintenance for the active transportation project. Once again, Jason.
Thank you, Mayor. So Eric Hansen's just about got our application ready for submittal here. We have an existing federal TA grant for this project, and there's also an exhibit in the packet, I believe, that shows the limits. It's a trail addition that ties into East Main Street over to Jewett Street along East Lion. We have a TA grant, federal dollars, for this project in 2026. It's an 80-20 grant, meaning there's a 20% local cost for the project. Our current estimate has local costs at $279,000. We're proposing to apply for state active transportation dollars to fill in the gap in construction costs of that 20% local match. So the active transportation funds can cover construction costs, and they do match federal grants. We got a matching AT grant last year for the C Street Southview Trail, which we'll be constructing in 2025. So that's 100% covered by grant. We're hoping to do the same here. The only thing that won't be covered is our engineering services. So we would propose or recommend that we approve these two resolutions to move forward with the application.
Questions? I
move approval.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John, to approve the application. I need to abstain from this vote because I'm an appointed member of the State Active Transportation Committee, which takes action on these. So I'm going to abstain. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, Stephen?
Wolesky,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes.
Alcorn,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
and Mayor Burns.
Abstain. And the motion does pass. That being said, this is and Eric, thanks for your work as well as Jason's on this. This is a good concept because we're able to, the TA, Transportation Alternatives, federal money, and then match that with the state money. So we'll move then to agenda item number 18. This is the Legion Field Stormwater Improvement Projects Phase 3. Consider the acceptance of the MPCA Stormwater Resilience Grant. This is somewhat of a formality, but we need to take formal action on the acceptance of that grant. Go ahead.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. A few months ago, probably 4 months ago, we were notified of award here for a resiliency grant in the amount of $867,894. We had applied for the Legion Field Phase 3 Stormwater Project. It's a project that probably wouldn't get done had it not been for the grant. It's a $1.4 million project, and the grant kind of fills a pretty large gap. We are working right now with Bolton and Mink to identify the scope and properly size this project. I did speak with the grant representatives, and the grant amount will not change as our project cost changes, so that's a good thing for us. As you mentioned, it's kind of a formality. I think it's a good project, and it's identified in our CIP for next year, and we're ready to finish design this winter. So,
Okay, thank you, Jason. Any questions?
Make motion.
Motion by C, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Craig, discussion? If not, Stephen will move to a vote.
Alcorn,
Yes.
Wolesky,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
and Mayor Burns.
Yes, and the motion does pass. Agenda item number 19, consider the memorandum of agreement providing land rights for the FAA navigational facilities and the weather observation equipment at the airport. Jason?
thank you. This MOA is probably a bit of a formality as well with the FAA. They need the agreement for 20-year rights to have these facilities at our airport. They own the AWAS, the weather observation system, as well as the remote communications outlet at our airport. And this agreement just allows them to have that presence and to do what they need to do to operate those facilities. So staff would recommend that we move forward.
Okay. Craig, any input from the Airport Commission?
Yeah, this again has the full support and request for city approval to the council from the Airport Commission.
Is there a motion?
I move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Stephen?
Schaefer,
Yes.
Alcorn,
Yes.
Mulesky,
Yes.
Lozinski,
Yes.
and Mayor Burns.
Yes, the motion does pass. Agenda item number 20, consider the award of the contract for the pickup of refuse at various city locations. I'll call on Sharon Hansen, City Administrator.
Okay, Mr. Mayor and Council, as you recall, we did receive quotes back in October and presented them for consideration during the October 22nd council meeting. At that time, the two quotes received, there was a consideration to pursue a contract with the local contractor and negotiate terms for not only 2 years, as was originally requested in the quote ask, but also possibly pursue beyond 2 years. Staff did meet with Southwest Sanitation recently and have a proposal for the council to consider tonight, and that would be to contract with Southwest Sanitation for a period of 5 years. The first 2 years of the contract would slightly be lower than the original quotes received by the lowest quote provided in the October meeting by $312. And you'll see that in the memo for the 2025 and 2026 rate at $12,678 for each year. And then the subsequent years, we did decide to use just flat amounts as an increase over the course of those 3 years, 27, 28, 29. It equates to about a 5% increase each year. We did want to present to council a little background on that, which includes at Lyon County Landfill, due to their regulatory requirements, similar to what the city marshals, they have to meet certain requirements with the refuse and their leachate, have proposed to increase their tipping fees, which will impact our local provider as well. And in addition, there is some inflationary cost that does burden the local contractors. We feel that what's presented to council is worthy of award for the next 5 years. Do want to add as well two separate things. This is the total amount by the end of 2029 is actually lower than what was paid in 23-24. And in addition, the local contractor, Southwest Sanitation, on a regular basis provides in-kind services to the city of Marshall. Often there's donations for porta potties, refuse collection, and the like, and also requests by public safety for some assistance in investigative work when it comes to refuse. So just wanted to add those additional comments in addition to what the memo that was provided.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Questions for Sharon?
Yeah, I actually have a question. Sharon, in our agreement, is there anything in there that allows them any protections under, like if there's a rapid or a significant increase in fuel rates, for example?
There is not.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I move approval and we accept the proposed quote from Southwest Sanitation.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by C. Discussion? If there's no discussion, we'll move to a vote. Stephen?
Alcorn,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Lozinski,
Yes.
and Mulesky.
Yes.
And the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 21. Consider the authorization of the remaining ARPA funds. I'll call on E.J. Moberg, Director of Administrative Services.
Thank you. So this is now an action item coming forward tonight after discussion at a work session related to budget and use of ARPA on the November 26th after the council meeting at that work session. In March of 2021, the American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law, which allocated money to various governmental units throughout the United States. We do have some of those monies remaining unspent. By the end of this year, we have to obligate those funds, and then we could either spend by the end of this year or obligate. Then if anything that's obligated, we have to spend by the end of 2026. In chatting with Baker Tilly, our consultants, we have noticed it might just be easier for us based on some of the program changes, et cetera, to just go ahead and have these funds paid for yet in 2024. So the staff recommendation is to disperse remaining city funds related to ARPA by the end of this year. Quentin, our fire chief, Quentin Brunswold, was able to get an invoice in part for the aerial truck that was ordered in the fall of 2022 with anticipated delivery next spring. So we can pay the portion of the monies that we received from Lyon County. That Lyon County did allocate $200,000 of their allocation to the city of Marshall. We've used a small portion of that for some grass rig units. So we have $172,150 remaining. So I'd be looking for the authority to include payment of that amount towards the aerial truck before the end of this year. And then the remaining ARPA monies that we received through the state of Minnesota amount to $655,889.54. The staff recommendation for that would be to apply those to the the Aquatic Center architect and engineer fees that have been paid in 2024 already for that project, which we have had fees in the amount of over $700,000 this year for that. So that full amount could be used to offset that, which then would free up money for the Aquatic Center project from the standpoint of we were still at a deficit when they presented earlier tonight. This would put us, would eliminate that deficit. We'd have a small amount of funds in the black per se, based on the numbers that they're projecting right now. So we would have a little bit of money left towards that project to help complete that we wouldn't have to reimburse ourselves for later when the project moves forward. I do anticipate, on a side note to this, but related, I do anticipate a resolution coming next week to council to address the fact that the Aquatic Center currently has deficit cash because of the project costs with no funding source. So we will be asking for their ability to do transfers for any said deficit before the end of this year. But as part of this, those costs have been paid. Take those monies from the general fund to recognize them as grant, and then our ARPA monies would be fully spent by the end of this year, and we wouldn't need to obligate or worry about any of the other additional paperwork or responsibilities or requirements that go with those funds.
Thank you, EJ. And as you said, this was reviewed at a previous work session by the council. Input from the council at this time?
I'll make motion.
Second.
Motion by C, seconded by John to allocate the remaining ARPA funds as recommended by staff for both the fire apparatus as well as the reimbursement of fees that have been expended for the Aquatic Center. Discussion on that motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Stephen?
Alcorn,
Yes.
Lozinski,
No.
Willeski,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
and Mayor Burns.
Yes, and the motion does pass. So we'll move then to agenda item number 22, the mayoral nomination for city attorney. The city charter does require that the mayor, every 2 years, recommend to the council the appointment of a city attorney, and then the council then can act on that recommendation. So it would be my recommendation at this time that similar to our current agreement, that Pam Whitmore with the firm of Kennedy and Graven be appointed city attorney for general and civil work, and that Matt Gross with the law firm of Cornstrom and Doring be appointed for the prosecution portion of the city attorney work. I offer that as a recommendation and entertain a motion to affirm, recognizing that the contract, if this is approved, the contract for both Pam Whitmore and Matt Gross would be forthcoming at the next regular council meeting.
I move approval of the recommendations.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Molesky,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Alcorn,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes,
and Lazinski.
Yes.
and that motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 23, Council Commission Board Liaison Reports. Craig?
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor.
From my reports, the Southwest Regional Development Commission will meet this Thursday. The revolving loan fund of the commission has met once earlier this month and will meet tomorrow. John?
Nothing.
See?
Library board met last night. Linda Bond is, thank you for her service. She was our board and her term is done. And then the children's librarian and the teens and public service manager all gave their end of the year reports. A lot of things happening over at the library. And then the biggest thing is the Plum Creek database has been completely switched over to a online version, which has really saved them money because now they don't have to worry about doing annual cleaning with the fans and then replacing their AC and not having to have a room. So they really enjoy that new data system.
And see, we could also add with the library, there has been one resignation of a board member.
Yes, yep.
So there is a vacancy that will be filled.
Yes, we do have 2 interviews next week, so.
Great.
Yep.
Jim?
I have nothing.
We'll move then to council member individual items. Jim?
I do have one thing, it's a question more for Jason. Rental ordinances, I was reading here that there's 400 that have been completed and there's 100 pending. Is that a good, because there's no charge for it to the end of the year, correct? And is that a good number? Are we on pace? Are you happy with it, or we got to do more work to get those in?
There is a charge at this point. The free registration ended sometime in October, I think.
Okay.
So you do have to pay now, but, we've tried to reach out many times to those on our list. There might be some folks that we have to continue to work with over the new year. We've got some draft letters created, and we're working with our attorney on how we get everybody registered. So I think we're doing reasonably well, but there are quite a few that are not registered.
About how many rentals are there? I mean, how many should we have when this is all done?
I feel like there was maybe around 700 buildings and fewer owners. So, but I think 700 buildings is the number that I recall.
So the number isn't looking too bad. Thank you. That's all I have. I was reading that in the brief there, and I had that question. So.
Very good. See?
I don't have anything.
John?
Nope.
Craig?
Nothing.
The only thing I would add is over the Thanksgiving weekend, the light up of the night was an excellent event. It was cold weather, but it was still well attended, both the parade and the event at the park, and it continues until Christmas. So we'll move then to staff reports. Sharon?
Yeah, I just wanted to report from Community Services that new this year is we are making available gift cards. So if you have not completed your holiday shopping, you can call Community Services or come, and could be applied towards recreation or community ed classes or pool season passes as well. So just as a request, actually from our Community Services Advisory Board, who really pushed staff to look into this. And based on their kind of leadership on this, staff really took it to another level. It is something that our new software system called Finley, even though it had a few hiccups initially with registration, has really come along quite nicely, including the offering of gift cards. So I just wanted to mention that particular new item for Community Services. And that's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
And thank you. Jason?
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing to report.
And Pam? I believe you're muted, but
No, nothing. Thank
Okay.
you, Mr. Mayor.
we'll move then to the remaining items on the agenda this evening, which includes the administrative brief for the council's review, the minutes from our planning commission, as well as our listing of building permits, and our listing of upcoming meetings. Is there anything further to come forward at this meeting this evening?
I think the only, we should make a note that we have a meeting in 1 week so the public knows they can come back to this enticing meeting on TV in exactly 1 week.
On December 17th, yes. Anything else? If not, with no further meeting or business come, I'll declare this meeting adjourned.